Hi, I'm Tim Wilson from Red Rocket Studio. Today I want to show you how to create really cool logos just using squares and circles. And the ones that you can see up here, I'm going to recreate them at the end of this video, so hang around until then as well. But let's jump in and create a small car logo. Now, if you've never used Illustrator before, which I assume is why a lot of you will be watching this, the first thing you need to do is to make a new page, or artboard as Illustrator calls them. Now there's a great big button here which says new, but if you're on one of the older versions of Illustrator you might not see that. So you can either click that button or you can go along to the file menu and choose new up the top. Now I'm just going to choose the default setting in here and make sure that my orientation is landscape, and I will click OK. The only reason I'm choosing landscape is it fills up the screen really nicely. So the tools on the left hand side here are in two rows. Yours might not look like that. You might find they're just a single row, and that's because of a little button right at the top here. So I'm going to click that button and make my tools a single row. So we're going to be using some of the basic shapes to create this. So let's have a look at the basic shapes that I'll use. I'm going to use squares and circles, to be honest. Over here, or about a quarter of the way down the toolbar, we've got the elliptical tool. And if I click and hold, you'll see there's a rectangle tool, ellipses, polygons, stars, and the flare tool, which honestly I don't know why they put in that group. But you might see the rectangle tool as your main tool. Whatever the case is, just click and hold and they will appear. Now, I'm going to take the rectangle tool, click and drag, and you'll see now I've got this little rectangle with a black line. Now this line is known as the stroke, and a white fill, that's the filled area in the middle. I can change that really easily by going to the top of my screen. Up here I can choose a different fill color, and to the right of that, this little black line over here, this is my stroke, so I can click on there and I can choose a stroke color. Now if you can't see your stroke color because it's kind of quite thin, you can then go along to the stroke weight, and I can increase that stroke weight. You can either click on those little up and down arrows, or you can choose from the drop down to change the stroke weight. Once again, I will just change the stroke color in here so that you can see. I'll go back to black and the fill color in here, and I'll go to a nice deep red. I think I'm going to change my stroke weight and make it a little bit narrower. Now let's bring in another shape here. I will just select that shape, and what I've done to select it, I'm using the black arrow tool and clicking and dragging to select it, and then I'm going to press either delete or backspace to get rid of it. You'll see my shortcuts come up at the bottom. I'm on a Mac here. They are almost identical on a PC, except where I use Command, which is that little symbol there, you'll use Control on a PC. So let me do that again. I'm going to go along and I'm going to get an ellipse, and I'm going to draw a little elliptical shape over here. Now this is the start of my car logo. So I want to use the top half of this elliptical shape for the bonnet and boot or trunk of my car. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get another shape. I'm going to get a rectangle, and I'm going to click and drag a rectangle over there. Now if your shapes are not right, use the black arrow tool. You can grab the corners by just going to the corner, and you can click and drag to change the shape around there. So I'm going to pop that there, and I'm going to select both of those shapes. So I'm clicking and I'm dragging across so that I touch both of those shapes at the same time, and that selects them both. Now let's have a look. I'm going to go to the window menu. I'm going to go down and I'm going to find something called the Pathfinder. Now all of these menus are in alphabetical order, so, or the window menu at least anyway. So if I go down to the P's, 3/4 of the way down, I'll click on that, and this is what the Pathfinder looks like. You might find yours is over that side. You can just move it around by grabbing it by its name or by the little bar at the top to move it. So what I want to do now is I want to use some of these buttons here, and I'm using these buttons to either subtract or add my shapes together. So you'll see if I were to click on this button here, it's actually added those two shapes together into one. I didn't like that. I want to undo it. Command and Z is your undo in Illustrator, or of course on the PC it's going to be Control and Z. So what about the next button? Well, the next button will subtract the top object from the bottom object. So if I click on that, you'll see it takes the bottom object and leaves it there, having subtracted the top object, which was the rectangle, from it. Well, that's going to be the start of my car. I think I want a little top to it. It's kind of looking a little bit like the old Audi TT or a VW Beetle. Let me go and get a rectangle. Now, sometimes you might want a nice rectangle like that. Sometimes you want rounded corners on it. If you're on one of the later versions of Illustrator, you will find that the black arrow tool allows you to drag on these little dots to round off the corners like that. I'm going to delete that. If you are not on the later versions, there's actually a rounded rectangle tool here. So I can use a rounded rectangle once again to make something with nice round rectangles. Now this is going to be too upright for my windscreen of the car, so I'm going to take a rectangle, I'm going to make another rectangle here, and I'm going to use the black arrow tool. I'm going to move just off the edge. You see when I move off the edge, you get that little double arrow there? Well, by doing that, I can then click and drag, and this allows me to rotate the shape around. So having rotated the shape, I will place it on top of that one. I will select, once again I'm still on that selection tool, the black arrow, there's two, there's a white arrow and a black arrow. I'm going to select both of those shapes and I'm going to subtract the top from the bottom one. And that kind of gives me the top of the windscreen. I'm going to move that into position down there. Let's select both of those and I'm going to unite them with the button on the left hand side. So that gives me the rough shape of my car. What about a little triangle shape here for where the window goes? Well, what a lot of people say here is they look there and they go, you've got all these polygons and stars and what have you, where's the triangle tool? Well, the triangle tool is actually the polygon tool. So if I go to the polygon and I click and drag, you see it comes up with a 6-sided poly. But if you use that tool and you just click once, it allows you to choose how many sides your shape is going to have. So I can just reduce that down to 3, click OK, and now every time I draw, I will get a triangle. I'm going to remove those, so back to the arrow tool again, select those two and delete them. Now let's take this little shape here. I'm going to grab a corner, make it a whole lot smaller. Let's pull that in a little bit, like so. And I'm then going to select both of those shapes and use that second button in the Pathfinder to crop or chop the top object out of the bottom object. Let's have a look at some wheels now. I'm going to go down here and I'm going to use an ellipse and I'm going to click and drag. Now when I'm dragging, I'm holding down the shift key. You can see the little shortcuts come up there. The shift key to constrain the proportions of that shape. Let's move that into the right position. But of course I want both of these wheels and the wheel arches, which is what I'm creating here, to be exactly the same size. So I'm going to copy this shape, hold down the Alt key and drag with the black arrow and it'll make a copy for you. Now I can just select both of those, go along to the second button and subtract the two top objects from the bottom one. You can select as many objects as you like and subtract all the top ones from the one at the very bottom. We're nearly finished here. Let's put some wheels in. Once again, I'll hold down the shift key over there. I'm going to click on the black arrow tool, go down, drag into position. I may as well change the color while I'm here, so I'm going to fill it with, I think, a nice dark gray. And once again, hold down the Alt key, drag that shape along, drop it into the right position there. Now, it looks a little bit too childlike with those big black lines around the outside, so I'm going to select it and go up here to the stroke, and I'm going to choose the line, the red line that goes across right to the top left hand corner. This is the none. So now there won't be any stroke on there, and I will just have the fills in there. At any point you can click on any of these shapes, change the color, add to them, subtract from them. Let's have a look at what it looks like. Well, that's it for the car logo. So let me show you how these big brands have created their own logos just using squares and circles done in Adobe Illustrator. Have a look how simple this is. Don't forget to subscribe when the video comes to an end, and we'll have lots more good stuff for you shortly. Look at this.